Oh, the FPS, or first-person shooter. It's a genre that I've come to love from my very first days as an 8 or 9-year-old playing Wolfenstein 3D on my very first PC. And yes, this is the actual floppy disk that was used to install Wolfenstein 3D onto my Tandy. Truth be told, I enjoyed the game, but didn't play it much at first because it scared the crap out of me. So I played more Commander Keen 1 and 4 at the time. But that thought of being able to slay Nazi soldiers with a gun that fired bullets, along with seeing their bloody corpses, struck a chord with me, and I came back a few years later, playing that shareware episode to completion multiple times, looking for every single enemy, treasure, and secret area. Fast forward a few years when my pal Mike lent me a copy of Ultimate Doom. Holy crap! I fell in love with the game immediately. It was dark, it was gory, the music was rocking, and the action was addictive. It was a game that I enjoyed so much that I wanted more like it. I played every single old school DOS shooter available to me. Catacombs, Heretic, Hexen, Blood, Duke Nukem 3D. I wanted more. So that's why I decided to do this video. There's just something about a good FPS that gets me in the zone. Maybe it's the variety of unique weapons that you might find, the way you can chop up demonic creatures into bits, the music that you may or may not encounter in the game, or even just the simple exploration in these worlds that were built just for you to save with your shotgun and pistol. I wanted to visit the games that I thought defined my love for the genre, and give a bit of time to explain why I think they are so fantastic. Keep in mind that these games may not necessarily be the best the genre has to offer, but instead, they are games that I just have fond memories of. Games that I can replay over and over again every year and still want to come back for more. Chances are, you won't agree with me. Halo isn't on this list, nor is any Call of Duty. I just never found them to be top 10 material. I should say that I only had 2 rules for this list. Number 1, 1 game per franchise. Otherwise, half of this video would probably be varieties of Doom. And number 2, the game must primarily be a first-person shooter. If there were third-person options, that's fine, but first-person must be a primary viewpoint. I should also mention that RPG elements would not remove the game from contention, such as XP systems, quests, or stuff like that, but the only game that I can really think of that would qualify for those criteria would be the Bethesda Fallout games, and spoiler alert, there's no Fallout on this top 10 list. Yes, I think they are fun games, but not top tier material. And believe me, it was hard to compose this list. I originally had about 24 games I had to cut down, and some of those cuts were really difficult to rationalize. So maybe there will be a follow-up at some point with my runners-up. I don't know what the future might bring. And as for one final note, most of these games are available for multiple systems, but only 2 of the games on this list were recorded from a console, with all others being played on PC. I don't know differences if I come across any, but if any of the games on this list interest you, then you're probably fine with any way you can play it, be it console, computer, or otherwise. So without further ado, grab your backpack, check your weapons, count your ammo, and join me in my adventure in going through my personal favorite top 10 first-person shooters. Number 10, Rage. Rage by id Software is a game that I spent more time on than I thought I would. Right from the start, the game has an interesting story in that asteroids or meteors or something are raining down from space and destroying Earth as we know it. To circumvent this, several people are put into what are called arcs, pods that were created to put special humans in a cryogenic sleep until a time in which they can safely wake up and do whatever they were supposed to do. Things go wrong, and many of the Ark inhabitants die due to what appears to be a malfunctioning system. When you leave your pod, the only survivor of the Ark that you called home, you are jumped by a crazy bandit that wants to see what your insides look like. Being saved by a local, you are now in a battle to help a small group of resistance fighters take down an unforgivingly oppressive government force called the Authority. The first thing I noticed when playing Rage were the graphics. They have almost a sort of semi-cartoonish look to them, maybe kinda, sorta, in my opinion. But it's not as evident as in a game such as Borderlands. Even so, the graphics looked fantastic, with lots of detail put into the ravaged landscapes. Bandits and mutants are tattooed, scarred, and have distinct factions that they belong in, and it's never a question of which group you're currently fighting. Blood has a surprisingly liquid feel when it spurts from wounds, and blowing up an enemy with rockets might get some chunks to be scattered across the battlefield. And you'll be seeing a lot of blood, because the gunplay of the game, the true core to any FPS, is some of the smoothest that I've ever seen for its generation. Everything just feels so fluid, from reloading animations to even the way the enemies fall when you shoot them. It's a combination of hard-coded death movements to ragdolls after the static animation ends. It still blew my mind shooting an enemy in the head as they rushed towards me, only to watch them drop their gun, clutch their head, and stumble right past me into a wall, stone cold dead. There's also a healthy amount of guns that you'll run into, including the standard pistol, an AK-47 style assault rifle, and the mandatory shotgun. But it doesn't end there, as there's plenty of ammo types and various upgraded parts that you can buy from vendors. You can use the crossbow to mind control an enemy to fight on your side for a short time, until he blows up due to a drug used. Use armor-piercing rounds to bite through the authorities' armored soldiers, buy a monocle to be able to make your revolver a sort of accurate sniper pistol, or fire electrical shots into water to make enemies think twice about wading in any sort of liquid. And because this is an id game, there are plenty of references to other games in their extensive vault. Right from the start, you'll see a Doom Marine bobblehead, and late in the game, you get a chain gun which also features BFG ammo. It's a shame that you don't get this weapon until the final dungeon, but I guess better late than never. Now, even a game on a top 10 list of FPS games has faults. I know on the PS3 version that I originally owned, there were some texture pop-in issues, but Rage on PC has some more noticeable graphical bugs, such as textures missing completely. Putting that aside, there are some other minor problems. If you are aiming to complete everything, you'll need to backtrack to each area twice to finish side quests, which is kind of a bummer. Some weapons start to become way underpowered at the end of the game, where you are expected to start purchasing and using the better high-powered ammo, at a significant price increase. But finally, the biggest annoyance that I've found is that Rage stops abruptly without a big fight against the fabled villain of the game, which, in my opinion, is one of the biggest disappointments you could run into in an FPS game. We expect epic final boss battles, but unfortunately a lot of games nowadays just ignore that and give you a basic one, or even worse, a quick time battle to finish off the game. Even so, Rage definitely has a home in my library, and it's a game that is perfect to start off this top 10 list. Number 9, Singularity. Going from one of my favorite developers to another, Raven Software gave us Singularity in the middle of 2010. This one, again, I originally played on PS3 and absolutely loved everything about it. You play as a US soldier entering an island off of the Russian coast known as Katorga 12, an experimental facility in which foreign powers were playing around with a new material called E99, which has the ability to alter time. Throughout your mission, you'll be jumping around from present day to the past, changing events to take down an evil dictator that had somehow rose to power. Just like in Rage, you'll meet up with a resistance fighter, who will assist you in progressing through the facility. Now, I will admit that Singularity probably won't be a game that will blow your mind or anything. It's just a solid playing game. The weapons, although varied, seem to have limited use, and I typically just held onto the shotgun and assault rifle. The other weapon of note that you can pick up when you locate it is a sniper rifle that feels like it belongs in a Max Payne game, in that if you are looking down the sight and fire, the E99 powered round is controlled by you, which never gets old. There are also weapon upgrades, along with personal perks, that can be located and bought by finding E99 tech and then searching for an upgrade station. What's cool is that your loadout can be changed at any time by interacting with a weapon rack, and if you really wanted to, you can purchase additional ammo, although I haven't done that once. Ever. The big draw to Singularity is the Time Manipulation Device, or TMD, and this is the main gimmick. Using it will either age or restore specifically marked items, and doing so is key to moving past some of the puzzles. For example, you may need to deflate a crate by aging it, use a telekinetic ability to push it somewhere else, leap onto it, and then restore it to its initial state, giving you just enough of a boost to leap over a wall. In addition to puzzles, you can use the TMD to instantly kill soldiers by aging them into skeletons. You can also alter the various mutants that you encounter, allowing you to level the playing field. It's just a fun mechanic that the game brings to the table. The big thing about Singularity is that it's not a terribly lengthy game. You can probably get through it in about 4 hours or so, and there's not a whole lot to attempt to extend this. Sure, you can try to get every single upgrade item, but there's really not much of a point to do so unless you're just shooting for completion for bragging rights. What we do have here is great, and the time traveling and altering story may keep you interested from start to finish. Number 8, Painkiller. When I started the idea of creating a top 10 FPS video, I knew Painkiller was going to be on this list, but I didn't know exactly where I was going to put it. But I was all for replaying the game again, as it was something I've been putting off, even though it's truly a blast to play. And after much pondering and consideration, number 8 is where it sits. Painkiller is a very simplistic game in design. Much like modern boomer shooters, the story has a minimal presence and you're just really told, hey, kill these demons to meet your wife. I mean, yeah, there is a tale of you and your wife dying in a horrible car crash in the middle of a storm, and how you have been doing God's work to quell the demonic threat to be able to atone for some sins that you weren't even aware that you had. Again, it's nothing that you will probably pay attention to, although I could imagine the foundation of Painkiller would be a pretty kick-ass Netflix series or something. So much like the modern Doom games and clones of it, you just need to enter various rooms, slaying everyone that dares to step in your path. Developer People Can Fly would later take this formula and release the excellent Bulletstorm. But we're not here talking about Bulletstorm, we're talking about Painkiller. And slay everyone you shall, because there are hundreds upon hundreds of demons that will attempt to kill you in each of the game's roughly 30 stages. Painkiller is a truly fast-paced game, in which you are in danger anytime you are standing still. Although it starts off easy enough at first, with enemies primarily focusing on melee weapons while you cut them down with a shotgun, you'll eventually find bigger threats that will throw or shoot stuff at you. And that's fine, because you'll be shooting back at them. Although the game doesn't feature a massive arsenal, each weapon you encounter is different from the others. And in addition to this, each also has a secondary function that uses a completely different ammo type, almost doubling the weapons that you can carry. For example, the shotgun fires off an icy blast that freezes an enemy solid and then subjects them to a quick death. The chain gun fires rockets, and one of the best weapons ever, the stake gun, not only flings massive pointy chunks of wood at the demons, but it also has a grenade launcher attached underneath. The weapons are just insanely fun to play around with, and as such, killing the hordes of creatures never gets old. Oh, and never needing the reload keeps the action going at a fast pace. If you want another challenge, each level also has a side objective that, if completed, unlocks a tarot card, which functions almost like a selectable perk. There are costs assigned to these cards, and you cannot equip every single one at the same time, making you strategize how you want to approach the next stage. The side objectives themselves range from defeating a boss in a tight time limit, to collecting every coin, to even finding every hidden holy artifact. And there's nothing wrong searching for those, because each stage is just a pleasure to navigate. Each one feels believable, from a derelict monastery on a hill, to an abandoned asylum, to a massive icy bridge. I personally found the urban style stages more fun, but really, there's not a single bad level in this game. To help complement the addictively solid gameplay, there is a rocking soundtrack included. If you're a fan of hard rock and metal like me, you'll really enjoy the music as a whole. Remember when games used to include music and not just environmental ambience or epic themes? Nah, this one gets in your face in all aspects, and doesn't expect you to back down. And that's why Painkiller is number 8 on my list. Number 7, Perfect Dark. GoldenEye 007 was a massive hit on the N64. That cannot be denied. The single-player campaign was enjoyable on its own, but most people remember the 2 to 4 person split-screen deathmatch that could be fired up and played for hours on end. But when I was in basic training in 2001, my brother had picked up Perfect Dark and wrote me a letter about it, saying that it was one of the best games that he had ever played. Sadly, I don't think I still have that letter, but I remember sitting on the barracks floor, bored on a Sunday after all of the cleaning was done, thinking about what he had told me. Reloads, alt fires, bot play. I could not wait to get done with basic training to return home to play it. And wow. Just wow. Perfect Dark blew me away with what a first-person shooter could be. Rare knew what they were doing on the platform, and it shows here. You play as Joanna Dark, and much like GoldenEye, you go through levels of varying difficulties, and the difficulty you choose determines how many objectives you'll need to complete. It's a story of betrayal, alien invasions, and of course, saving the universe. What I feel really makes Perfect Dark are the weapons. This is the first game that I can recall ever seeing reload animations, and it floored me. All other games up to this point that I had played simply had limitless reserves as long as you had ammo, or as what GoldenEye did, just dip the weapon under the screen, then come back up magically reloaded. In Perfect Dark, you see Joanna ejecting a mag and inserting a new one in different ways, depending on the weapon used. Of course, nowadays, this is a common practice, but it wasn't then. As for the weapons themselves, there are quite a few, each with the different pros and cons. various pistols, including the Falcon, Magsight, Mauler, Phoenix, so many assault rifles and SMGs, the Dragon and Super Dragon, the Cyclone, the AR-34, the CMP-150, and that's not to mention stuff like the Reaper, a 200-round Gatling gun style weapon that featured blades on the barrels to make mincemeat of anyone that dared to get too close, and the iconic Farsight, which is a one-hit kill sniper rifle with auto-aim and thermal sights to practically cheat your way through a fight. And there's also one of my favorite guns of all time, the laptop gun, a weapon that not only folds up to look like a mini computer, but can also be thrown on a wall to act as a sentry turret. In competitive play, this almost feels unfair. But that's the thing, each weapon has their uses. You can use the Cyclone's auto discharge to pull the trigger once and watch all 50 rounds be fired. Use the secondary proximity mine function of the Dragon to toss it on the ground next to a real one and watch someone choose wrong. Laugh as you use the tranquilizer gun to dose up your prey and then move in to administer a lethal injection. And with a lot of these guns being able to be held with one in each hand, the options are nearly limitless. Although the main campaign is a great draw, with options to play either by working together in traditional co-op, or in what really hasn't been seen since, a counter-op mode where the other player takes control of the enemy to attempt to hinder you, I think I spent a lot more time playing the arena modes. Sure, you can set this up to play with friends with a fully customizable setup of different weapon drops, game modes, bot difficulties, arenas, and other mutators, but there's also a challenge mode that has about 30 different scenarios that start off simple but get excruciatingly hard further in, to the point that some of them just feel impossible unless you can get a good gun quickly and start accumulating a lead. You can easily spend hours upon hours just playing this mode alone and not touch the story often. Even with this, there's even a few other things that you can do in the hub of the game if you back out of the main menu. You can explore the facility and take part in several training scenarios, but I found myself going back to the shooting range the most. By coming here, you can attempt to complete the 3 challenges for each weapon that you find in the game, and the more medals that you get, the more classic GoldenEye weapons that you unlock for other modes. The amount of content Rare had crammed into this cartridge is astounding, but it does come at a cost. The frame rate is, for the most part, kinda crap. It's about par for an N64 game, and the expansion pack was required to get the full game, otherwise part of it is locked out. I must note that I played this game on the Rare Replay collection on Xbox One, so it is improved slightly, but I needed to mention the original game's shortcomings, as it isn't avoidable. But even so, Perfect Dark is one of those games that if you can get a few friends over, it will provide hours of fun. Who knows? Maybe you'll be like me and prefer it over GoldenEye. Number 6. Blood. I live. Again. Such an iconic line that is uttered from the very first stage of the game when the hero Caleb rises from his grave with a pitchfork and a mission of revenge. Granted, this old DOS game has a story typical of the era, which means it's nearly non-existent, with a horribly rendered CGI intro to boot. But scrape all of that away and you get one hell of a violent shooter. Blood was not afraid to be unique, and this all starts with the weapons. Instead of a typical bullet-firing pistol, you get a flare gun that had the potential to engulf enemies in flame, allowing you to watch them run around, waving their arms as Caleb cackles in delight. A voodoo doll rips flesh from bone. A Tesla cannon puts thousands of volts of electricity into hellhounds. Instead of grenades, bundles of dynamite. And I don't know of any other game in which you use an aerosol can and a Zippo to create a makeshift flamethrower. Yes, you get a Tommy gun and a double-barreled shotgun, but let's face it, the other weapons are just as fun, if not even more so. And the enemies you get to shoot down are interesting characters, such as evil cultists, grim reapers that fade in and out of reality, spiders that will blind you or take away your ability to see straight, zombies that request brains, and humans that seem to have come out of a typical horror movie, vomiting bile and slashing a meat cleaver at you. What's more, they all die in horribly gruesome ways, leading to the gory overall presentation of the game. Zombies can lose their heads, and yes, you can kick them around, watching the blood squirt all over the place. Charred remains of toasted cultists will litter the ground. Explosions will cause enemies to be fragmented, scattering their bits across the room. Being that this game was based on the build engine, which is what Duke Nukem 3D has been built on, and that game itself had a healthy serving of visceral detail, you won't be disappointed if you're looking for a sadistic time here. But that's not to say that this is all that Blood has going for it. Oh no! Lots of unique stages, including a cult's cathedral, a romp through a meatpacking plant, and even a freaking joyride through an amusement park. There's also a lot of pop culture references that, sadly, in a few years, many people probably won't understand. There's an enemy, a severed hand, that is taken directly from Evil Dead, as it attempts to strangle you as it repeats, "I'll swallow your soul." Caleb states, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," in the beginning of episode 2, as he's floating towards a large ship. There's even an entire stage called Crystal Lake, with this being an obvious reference to Friday the 13th. I could create an entire video based on these types of references, but there's already websites out there devoted to that, like the Blood Wiki. I will admit that, as much fun as Blood is, it doesn't reach higher on the list because after a few hours, it does get repetitive, which is sadly a common trait found in these older shooters. Swapping weapons due to dwindling ammo counts does help a bit, but you're always navigating the neat stages looking for one of 6, count 'em, 6 keys to proceed further into the game, all while blasting the same demons. And if you cannot find a room and the map isn't helping, you can easily be sprinting throughout these rooms with nothing to do other than trying to figure out where the hell that undiscovered area might be. Even with this handicap, if you've never played Blood before, there are a lot of reasons to give it a go. You'll have a bloody good time. Number 5. Hexen. From one DOS shooter to another, Hexen has to be possibly my favorite DOS shooter of all time. And yes, with that statement, you won't see any more DOS shooters on this list, so I'm sorry if that upsets you. As I said at the start, Doom hooked me into the FPS genre. After that, I played Heretic like crazy, and loved the Doom meets fantasy idea that the game claimed. Magical weapons instead of guns, a full-out inventory system, sweet water and lava effects. It wouldn't be till years later that I played the full game instead of just the shareware episode, but I wanted more fantasy FPS hijinks. And then my friend Jares let me borrow Hexen. Holy crap. This game took the foundation that it had laid with Heretic and just completely built all around it. We still keep the magical setting that Heretic introduced and just expanded it into a game that no one was expecting. For one, the game was no longer linear. You complete the first stage and then are thrown into a hub world, of which featured anywhere from 3 to 6 different levels, not including the secret stage in each area. Once you solve the puzzle of the hub world, you move on to the next. There are 5 hub worlds, so that should give you an idea of the sheer size of the game. And to help set the mood of the oppressive world in which the villain, Korax, presides, let me show you how the game actually boots up.
Greetings, mortal.
That is your first introduction to Hexen, and even better, there are actual voices in the game. Yeah, Wolfenstein had voices too, but in Hexen, Korax taunts you in every hub world.
Greetings, mortal. Are you ready to die?
I remember when back in the day, the guy who gave my family his old IBM Aptiva, he'd visited, and I practically pulled him into my room to show him this. Yeah, I know, I'm a nerd, but I don't care, this blew my little mind. And really, the game as a whole shines and continues to challenge what was thought of as a standard FPS. You weren't limited to playing with just one character. From the start, you get the choice between 3 vastly different killers. A fighter that focused on melee attacks, a cleric that had the ability to heal with its serpent staff, and a mage that used his hands to dish out some elemental damage in the form of spells. One limitation is that you were stuck using the character you chose for your complete playthrough, and each did only have a total of 4 weapons. But when all of the weapons are fun to use, it's not that big of a deal. And hell, if you're really broken about, I'm stuck using the same character, there's cheat codes to fix that, so keep that in mind. Each character's differences don't stop at the weapons. Some of the items, like the flasks, behave differently depending on your class, with one throwing it like a grenade, one using it as a timed bomb, and the other exploding it into a poisonous gas. And yes, there are a few different, although minor, RPG elements to Hexen. We can start at the character classes. Instead of bullets, you use 2 different types of mana, or mana, however you pronounce it, to power your weapons, with each character's final weapon consuming both types to fire. Speaking of these final weapons, you have to actually explore the worlds a bit to find them, as they are all broken into 3 pieces and must be completely assembled before being able to wield it. No, this isn't a hugely difficult task, but it does help lead up to the momentous occasion when you finally get it all together and are able to use it in all of its glory. And back to the puzzles. No, they're not really anything confusing, as all they really consist of is just locating switches, but they can be hard to find. Some may also require items to access areas that house these switches. The first time that you play the game, expect to be lost for a little while until you know for sure where you are supposed to go. And thankfully, unlike many of the other DOS shooters, enemies will occasionally respawn to give you something to slay in your aimless pathfinding. Being that Hexen is more of a semi-open world and that levels will be re-entered multiple times, they aren't as unique as other games, such as its predecessor, Heretic. Instead, they are mostly themed. The first hub world has the trial of fire, ice, and steel. The third has multiple sections of a hidden, run-down monastery. The fifth has you exploring various mausoleums to get items required to take down Korax. Even with each level looking a bit like the last, I can't knock the game as everything looks fantastic. You'll see splashes when you jump into the water, and yes, you can actually jump in this game. Enemies will shatter into icy chunks if you blast them with the Mage's freeze spell. There are plenty of fog effects. Trees can be brought to ash. Pots can be shattered to reveal any items inside. Seriously, this game simply looks amazing, and with programs like Xandronium, it's still fully playable at a respectable resolution today, allowing you to fully enjoy the world of Hexen. And enjoy it, you really should, as it's just not your standard DOS shooter. And if there's any game on this list that I think requires a new, modern remake, it's Hexen. Number 4, Black. Black is the other game that I recorded on console, although technically I used an emulator to give a crisper image, and also it was easier for me to record from. It's a shooter that tries to present a story, but honestly, it's just a typical good guys going after bad guys in foreign areas while under secret missions kind of story. But like many games on this list, Black's gameplay far outshines what is presented in the mediocre plotlines. Black has some fantastic elements that all come together in a package that presents itself as a fancy, graphical masterpiece. The set pieces that you run around in may look somewhat typical, such as a factory, ruined city, and underground bunkers, but what Black does to compensate for this is be flashy, and this should be expected considering that the game was developed by Criterion, devs of the fast-paced Burnout games. Objects can be blown up, denoted by a black dot when you aim at them. Sparks fly and dust covers areas. Shot-out rounds will ricochet. And in an unusual design choice, when reloading, the game blurs out everything except for your weapon, focusing on the beauty of that gunmetal. In order to further emphasize on the action, the weapons are buffed up quite a bit. Shotguns aren't too noticeable other than the forceful animation that you see when pumping in a fresh shell into the chamber, and also the fact that you can blow down doors with a shot. But the SMGs and assault rifles have extended clips, with an AK-47 containing a full 80 rounds and the M16 boasting 90 in the mag. This might sound insane, but the enemies in Black could be considered bullet sponges, requiring a good half of those mags to pierce them before they drop dead. Headshots are preferred since that will kill them much quicker. Normally, I'd complain more about enemies that just eat bullets as a hobby, but with the way that the gunplay feeds off of this, it just works. If there's one thing that I am a little confused about, it's the fact that there's no blood in this game. If I was to guess, it's so that you can focus more on the effects of the game instead of any of the red stuff, but I just need to mention it. Even though the game itself is short, clocking at about 4 hours over 8 missions, the game is still fun to repeat on harder difficulties to unlock silver and gold skins for your weapons. There's also no saving during the missions, so you have to complete each one in one sitting. For a shooter designed by guys that were behind some of the best racing games on the PS2, Black turned out amazing, and I really wish there would be a sequel. But at this point, I'm just not holding my breath anymore. Number 3, Metro 2033. Here we are, cracking the top 3. To start it off, I gotta say, I freaking love the Metro games. Ever since I played 2033, I fell in love with the story, the atmosphere, and the overall depressing look of the games. Metro 2033 might have the least amount of action than any other game on my list, but that doesn't take away anything else that is shown to you here. You play as a young man named Artyom, who is tasked with trying to save the world from the Dark Ones, a group of creatures that came about after the missiles fell in Moscow, creating what was considered the end of days. His journey takes place primarily in the dark, dank, grimy underground metro tunnels, but you do need to reach the snowy surface every once in a while. Doing so forces you to don a highly fragile gas mask, in which you'll also need to ration your canisters, as they are all repurposed due to the lack of materials. Another thing that helps lend to the oppressive atmosphere is the weapons that you'll be using. Although you do get some that are military grade in the late game levels, the first few that you'll be using are stuff that appears to be hobbled together with loose parts, including one of my favorite guns, the Bastard.
Hello, Artyom. You need some weapons? Okay, let's take a look.
Anyone can learn anything.
Submachine gun, 5.45 caliber, made in the armory. It's got poor accuracy and overheats like hell. That's why they call it a bastard gun.
Here's your gun.
There's also pneumatic weapons that require you to pump the tanks to increase power. The revolving shambler shotgun is another cool weapon, which does the job well, minus its extended reload time. Ammo is also at a premium, as you'll be searching corpses in random corners to find items and bullets. You'll find the standard rounds, but you can also find what are called military grade rounds, which are used as currency at the various shops you'll encounter due to the rarity of them. If you're in a pinch, you can also decide to load these military grade rounds into some of your weapons, which increase the power, but as the game puts it, you're literally shooting away your cash. You will fight a few different factions of humans, including communists and even Nazis, but these guys are easy to fight compared to the mutants you'll encounter. The Nosalises, or however that's pronounced, they're basically overgrown, violent rats, and don't pose a huge threat. But then you come across the winged, generically named demons, lovingly called bitches by one of the characters in the later game. There's also the librarian, named due to them living inside of a massive library that becomes integral to the story. Usually, when you run into these creatures, you know you're going to be in for a hellish fight, and hope you have enough ammo to fight them off. When you do get lured into combat, it's usually pretty stressful, especially if you have a gas mask equipped. It might break, requiring you to scramble to find another one in better shape before you suffocate in the harsh, oxygen-starved world. I really wish I could talk about the story, but it's such a central part to the game that I feel I would spoil it by saying even a sentence to detail anything. But I will note that I wonder if this game takes place in the Stalker universe. There are multiple similarities: the mutant creatures, the anomalies that you might run into, and one of the characters even mentions the roadside picnic book that Stalker was based on. Is this just a coincidence? I don't know. I have not finished Metro Exodus yet, so it might be better than Metro 2033. But Metro 2033 is one hell of a way to start what has been, so far, a successful trilogy, and that's why it's number 3 on my top 10 list. And yes, I do want to read the books at some point. Number 2, Doom. You had to have known that a Doom game would be featured in this video. It's no secret that I'm a huge fan of the entire series, starting off with the original back in 1998. I know, the game was released in 93, but I didn't play it myself until 98, and I was hooked since. But I already mentioned how I got dragged into the world of FPS games, so I don't need to go on about that again. But with my one game per series rule, it was a hard decision to put Doom 2016 over Doom 2. And yes, I would have voted for Doom 2 over the original, just due to the expanded features in the form of the awesome new enemies and the double-barreled shotgun. I'll talk about Doom as a whole in a future video. When Doom was released in 2016, I had pre-ordered it, and I was ready. The nearly 70GB download was massive for its day, and it took me 3 days on my old crappy backwoods internet connection to preload it. And no, I'm not joking about that. But it was well worth the wait. I had taken a week off from work to play the game, and I had reviewed it immediately. It was one of the best shooters I had ever played, and I could not put down the proverbial controller. I was using a keyboard and mouse, I couldn't put those down. Anyway, you play as the Doom Marine, as usual. The game immediately sets the tone, opening with a bloody, action-packed scene. You find yourself chained to a stone altar, with the demon shambling up to you. You break the chain, smash the demon's head into a bloody pulp on the altar, and set about clearing the room. The game doesn't slow down until the very end, when you defeat the final boss. Like many other shooters, the story kind of exists just to have a plot. It's about using hell energy to power a large scientific facility, and this goes horribly wrong. You probably won't care as you're too busy shooting down imps, mancubuses, cacodemons, and hell knights. This game is violent. Really, really violent. Similar in nature to Painkiller, your weapons don't need to reload, so you can focus on the action. And of action, there's a lot of it. You go from area to area, removing every single demon that attempts to stop you. What sets this game apart from many other shooters are the glory kills. When you deal enough damage to a monster, they will stagger a bit and start to flash. By pressing a single button, the Doom Marine will dismember the demon in a bloody fashion. Eyes can get punctured, legs or horns ripped off and used as a bludgeon, knees can crush a skull. If you have a weak stomach or have kids in the room, Doom might not be a game that you'll want to play at the moment. Not only are you simply defeating enemies in your path to get to the end of the stage, there's a lot of other things that you can look out for to enhance the experience. There are plenty of secrets which might give you ammo, health, armor, or even a Doom Marine doll, of which I am happy to have one of my own. There are rune trials that, upon completion, will give you a perk that might increase your chances of survival. There's also super hidden levers that will allow you to unlock classic levels, which you can play for fun for a short diversion. The map that you can utilize definitely helps you find all the power-ups and secrets, and you might be checking it out often. What's fantastic about Doom is just how smooth it is. You never feel as if you don't have control of your character, which makes running through the stages, blowing up demons just an enjoyable experience from start to finish. And if you really want a challenge, you can even try the Ultra Nightmare mode, which is a hardcore mode in which enemies do critical damage on every strike, and if you die, you start from the very beginning of the game. Needless to say, I can't even finish the first stage. Doom 2016 is a must-play for any first-person shooter fan, and I almost put it at number 1. It's close, but there's one game that I just had to place above it because the combat is just plain addictive and graphically pleasing. Do you know what it is? Well, I'm about to tell you. Number 1, Fear. I'm sure I'm going to get some criticism for this. Fear? Better than Doom? Come on! But as I said at the start, these are my personal favorite FPS games, and honestly, I could consider Fear and Doom to be almost interchangeable. It's really, really close. Fear stands for First Encounter Assault Recon, which is just a fancy way of being able to call the game Fear. You play as a Fear agent, who doesn't actually have a name, but in Fear 3 you find out he's called Point Man. Which is just plain stupid if you ask me. He, along with his squad, is on the hunt for one Paxton Fettel, a psychic commander that is able to take control of an army of clone soldiers. Fettel might be a villain, but the story really revolves around a little girl named Alma. She is just utterly frightening. She will stalk you throughout the game, appearing from nowhere, only to disappear with a whisper or a laugh to linger behind. This is one of the few horror-themed games that had originally creeped me out, a feat that is really hard to do. Nowadays, no, I don't jump, but that's because I played the game so many times, I know what's going to happen. Now, I mentioned previously that the combat was addictive and graphically pleasing. There isn't a huge variety of weapons, but they all do make the gameplay fun. The clone soldiers have a great AI and attempt to use tactics to take you down. And as you are firing at them, sparks will be shot towards you, papers will be scattered, massive craters will appear in walls, dust will fog your view, and fire will linger from explosions. No matter how many times you see it, the effects are a sight to see. As for the guns, most are pretty competent, with various rifles taking the forefront. The pistols that you can handle have some awesome punch to them, and the railgun makes it satisfying to watch corpses morph instantly into skeletons. But best of all, the shotgun is one of the best shotguns in any shooter. It will mow down any threats quickly, but best of all, sometimes the enemy will be blasted into a bloody pulp, leaving only chunks of meat behind. Add into this your ability to slow down time, and it makes for some highly engaging battles. The game is definitely dark, and obviously that's by design. You do get access to a flashlight, but it has to recharge frequently, which kinda drives me nuts, yet at the same time, you don't want to use it all of the time, as an enemy will call it out if they see it. Even as dark as it is, there is some great attention to detail in the world design. Office buildings actually look like something you might run into, an underground lab feels the part, and so on. I will admit that some areas do drag on for far too long, which is why I had thought about possibly putting Doom in front of Fear, but the deciding factor was simply the fun of the battles. checking out the aftermath after each gunfight, there's just something pleasing about it. And because of the solid combat, I consider Fear to be my personal favorite FPS. So that's that. I'm sure there are plenty of you out there that are questioning my choices, shaking their heads, thinking, what is wrong with you? But that's fine. We are all entitled to our opinions. So let me know your thoughts, what you believe to be your personal favorites, and should I make a second video based on runners-up? I sincerely hope you all enjoyed this video, as I spent a lot of time recording all the footage and typing it all up. Until next time, happy fragging.